Welcome to the Live Incredibly podcast. In this episode, I am joined by Ben Darsow. Ben is an Australian-born comedian with over 20 years of experience making people laugh. So thank you for watching and enjoy the show. Thanks for coming on, Ben. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
Where are you now then? So you've just finished your cruise?
Yeah. So I'm just here in Sydney. I'll flick my camera one sec. There we go.
Right.
So that will make no sense to anyone who's just listening to this, but the visual is just of Sydney Airport. I was just on a cruise last week. A ship that I'm on a fair bit was sailing out of Brisbane all the way over to Seattle. It's doing its crossing. It's only here for the sort of the summer kind of season in Australia. And so I performed on there for the first 7 nights of its crossing. We had a week on board with the passengers all the way through to Guam, which is a territory of the US just above Papua New Guinea. And so that's where that's where we got off. Myself and 3 other comedians, and then a few other comedians got on board for the next leg of the journey for those passengers. And then getting home involved a 4-hour flight directly north from Guam to Tokyo, and then a few hours in a hotel there. And then yesterday was 9 hours down from Tokyo to Sydney. So you've got a much more human version of me today than the one that existed last night when I got back in.
Oh, okay. So you've just, what was it? How long travel was that in between then on the flight? 9 hours.
Well, it was. Yeah, and the weird thing as well, like Guam is just such a random spot in the middle of nowhere. Like you really have to open up your map to even kind of see it.
Yeah, I saw your picture on Instagram, just a circle in the middle of the ocean. I was like, oh, okay, nice to see you doing well. You found yourself a nice little space.
Yeah, that's 100% what it is. And the flight options out of there are so limited. So we had to go 4 hours directly north to Japan, and then the flight back down to Sydney goes directly over Guam. And so you've done, by that stage, 8 hours of flying.
Oh,
and then You're in the air, over Guam with another 5 or 6 hours to go to Sydney.
Oh dear. Yeah, we had to do it from the UK to Australia, obviously, back in September. And for us, we had to take 3 separate flights. The whole journey in total, I think, was around 23 hours, including layovers. I know. So we went from Manchester Airport in the Midlands in the UK to Paris, Charles de Gaulle. Then when we got to Paris, we literally had to run. We had to sprint straight across because we didn't have any idea that because we had to check our bags into a Chinese airline, which all their websites, none of the check-ins were in English at all. And we couldn't figure out how to do it, and it wouldn't let us do it at all. And we didn't realize that Charles de Gaulle is the airport split up by a train. It's got its own train system, like shuttle trains.
Oh wow!
So we had to sprint with all of our luggage as soon as it came off, get on one train to the other side of the airport, run with our luggage again to go into to get it checked in, and then sprint to the gate, which was just closing as we got there. And it was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna miss this whole thing. The whole Australian journey could have been over before it began. But yeah,
you had your flight to Australia.
Yeah, exactly. But then I suppose for yourself, you must get used to a lot of travel. How do you cope with being on the road with your comedy most of the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you learn to pace yourself. So for me, I'm just sitting here for last night and tonight in this airport. In this hotel just next to the airport, and I've got 1 4-night cruise left, which is starting tomorrow from out of Sydney, and it just makes its way up to Cairns. And that's been the tail end of. I've had kind of 5 projects this road trip. It's almost a month exactly on the dot by the time this next cruise finishes. And so I just kind of got my head around, what this trip is. It was a cruise on Virgin, which is where you and I met, and then what was it? It was actually the same ship that I'm getting onto tomorrow. Just a quick little one for a few days from, I think it was Sydney up to Noumea, and then I had a week back in Sydney at the Comedy Store, and then I just had those last 7 nights on that other ship up to Guam. So it's just been, I think, a matter of like dividing it into little chunks, and I just try and reach the next little finish line, and then recharge as best I can when I get a night or two, in a hotel in between, in between whatever it is, ships, or a week doing the comedy clubs. And I try to have the do not disturb sign on my door, and absolutely no alarm clock set, and just let myself sleep in as much as I need to. And then I'm from Adelaide in South Australia, so when I get back home, just allow myself to really have kind of off mode. I just live down at my golf club and catch up with friends, see family, really don't think at all about work, and then just make sure I have a good energy for the next trip. I tend to, sorry, this is becoming a slightly longer answer, but I tend to find about a month is as much as I feel energized with. If it's a week or two away, that goes very, very quickly. Anything over 4 or 5 weeks away in one chunk, and it starts to just feel like it's maybe a little too much. So I'm I'm very conscious that I have 4 more days of this road trip, and then I'm home for a really good recharge.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it's a different way of approaching that work-life balance, which you don't
Yeah,
see in many other different positions or roles. And that's not regardless
yeah,
of whatever amount of success when it comes to comedy. You're going on very much a show-to-show basis,
yeah,
unless you're doing your own tour where you can kind of set those scheduled times in. And as you say, I found interesting you said that they were projects. You called them
yeah,
projects, and it wasn't it wasn't a gig, it wasn't a contract, it was a project for each one.
yeah,
So you've got that kind of time blocks almost really out of your hands completely in terms of unless it's the season for obviously the cruising season.
yeah,
Because I heard the last person I had on the podcast, Lewis Coops, a musician, he was a pianist on cruise ships as well, and he says how once you get once you go on one of them, once you will work on one and do a season on one, it's
yeah.
very hard. You always find a way to kind of bring you back and drag you back, regardless of what's going on elsewise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very true, and I think with the ships in particular, they're such a solid source of work. I mean, for example, Carnival is one of the main cruise lines that I work for. You and I obviously met on that Virgin one, and I've been working for P&O for a few years. But Carnival, for example, they have booked all the way through until the end of March 2025 already. So that's almost a 12-month horizon from
Oh
where we
wow!
are right here. Yeah, in kind of early April. Um, so the volume of work that they're giving me, and that sort of horizon in advance where I know that I have work, and I know just the logistics of where that will be, like what cities, etc., and what specific dates, and also the rate of pay that they offer, and the fact that, as your musician friend, I'm sure would um, also say, the way in which our expenses are covered. So you're not only sort of earning your money, but you're not paying for any rent anywhere, or any flights, or any of your food. It makes it a really, really valuable addition to the schedule. And I think um, you definitely want to utilize that. I mean, before you're possibly, like a genuine kind of internationally touring, theater level act with your own kind of global audience base, where you can essentially just kind of, drive that yourself off of your profile and your ability. It's it's a really it's a really valuable avenue of work. And yeah, in terms of your friend mentioning that it kind of sucks you back in, it kind of does. And I think you also just need to be conscious that you need to balance it. So like that week that I had at the comedy on this sort of month away, like that's something that I see as really, really important to keep factoring in. You obviously have, the expenses of day-to-day life when you're in a city, for a week doing the clubs, and it's not quite as well paid as you are out on the ships, but it just kind of connects you with that day-to-day audience. It's definitely a bubble out on the ships. You're dealing with a particular kind of clientele. People are on holiday mode and mood. Yeah, and it's just it's a little bit removed from things. It's a big deal. It seems like the whole world while you're out there, because you're literally on this kind of ship in the middle of the ocean, and it's your job to sort of entertain those people. And you're constantly bumping into people. There's only ever sort of a couple of thousand people on those ships, but the reality is, once that week or so that you're out there with those people finishes, it means nothing. Like, you literally mean nothing to them anymore. They don't mean anything to you. And
Well,
that
you mean something to me then.
yeah, I guess just sort of in terms of the the practicalities of kind of the service that you're providing for them. I've met I've actually met quite a lot of like really, really cool people out there. And fortunately, in the day and age of social media, can sort of stay in touch with people on Insta and so forth. And I have seen people in certain cities when I've kind of looped back to wherever they live. So 100% that exists. But just in a sort of an industry sense, it kind of it disappears as quickly as it kind of springs up.
Yeah.
When you're on them. So I
Well, I
think
suppose it
maintaining that.
has. Well, I suppose it has that very much a case of it's a six of one, half a dozen of the other, where it's a luxury that not many comedians get, and not many people in your industry get, where they can say, right, for this month, this month, this month, so far as however long in the future, you've got solid work. You haven't got to think about booking gigs. You haven't got to think about promoting and doing other stuff.
Yeah.
You've got this set in place. Obviously, the benefits. I worked seasons previously. I don't know if I remember me telling you before.
Yeah.
Me and Katie worked seasons, where having that luxury of having your accommodation and your food and your transport all paid for you it's a massive stress off your head. I mean, we were out the whole time, and we were in Greece for the first one, and we didn't get paid next to anything whatsoever. I think it worked out as like €100 per week.
Yeah.
What we got, which is just absolutely just ridiculous, but there's no laws for it in Greece. But they paid for our flights out there. We were on the guest flights because they chartered an airline. We got our accommodations paid for, our food was paid for, and the drinks were so cheap, and we often got them for very, very cheap anyway. So I was thinking about this the whole time, and that throughout that whole 3-month period that I was there, I put my body through absolute hell and was allowed to and got away with it. But I did not once feel overstressed. I had a great night's sleep every single night. Whereas I could be back at home or wherever and doing a job, when you've got those stresses on your mind, it's something that, again, that takes that risk factor away from you. But then, as you already mentioned, you've got the other side of it completely, where because you're away, very often the people you meet there, people you perform in front of, it's you come, you say hi, you say goodbye, and it hasn't got that sort of compounding effect week on week, week in, week out, seeing the same people over and over, where you can actually build those connections and build more experience as well. And I imagine it can be quite lonely doing the cruises in particular.
Yeah. It's a funny one. I would say not necessarily like lonely, but just very fragmented, as in you're constantly around people. That's the job. But then it disappears as quickly as it appeared, and then it's almost like swipe, and then you're in the next bubble. Yeah, very, very, very transient. Yeah, which is something that takes getting used to. How you sort of deal with that. You try and sort of. Oh, I guess my thoughts on that are try to be as kind of, I don't know, without sounding corny, but as present and immersed as you can in that bubble for the time that you're there. Like really take an interest in people, to the degree that you can, and be open about where you're at. But then also just be aware that that bubble will be over very shortly, and then it will be the next one. And I think that learning to deal with that just comes with experience, doesn't it?
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, it's the same in all walks of life, where being present very often, well, the 99.99% of the time is only going to be a benefit to yourself wherever you are. As much as you might be thinking of what's going to happen, because that was my main issue with doing seasons, was in my head, when it's over, I've got to do something else. Not for the first 2/3 of that season or that contract or project, as you call it. I was completely fine in the moment for as much of it as possible. But coming up to that last third, that was when they started ticking a little bit in the back of the mind, like, oh, at some point, this is done. All these niceties and this luxury that we've been having here, that's gone. There'll always be another season, but it won't be for a while, and it's almost a snap back to reality at that same point, which for me was one of the reasons I wanted to get away from it. I wanted to get away from those seasons. For as fun as they are and as stress-free as they are as well, they're great to do. I imagine for yourself as well. If you can say, right, for 2 to 3 months a year, I'm going to go work on cruises. When, however, you can say in your mind that for whatever happened for the previous 9 months of the year, you can put that behind you and you can restock your time, your energy, you can catch up on your sleep, stress-free for the most part, and top up the bank balance as well if need be. Because does it work on cruises? Is it all tax-free?
No, it's definitely not tax-free. I guess for any of your audience in Australia, they would know about GST, which is a slightly different system of taxation. Some of the cruises attract that, as any work in Australia would, and then some of them don't. So that's really the main way it kind of it varies. Yeah, you still definitely get taxed, but I think just the big win is what we were talking about, where you cover so little. You're required to cover so little on the expenses side that it's man, it's crazy. This little sort of window that I'm in at the moment. I mean, I'm 22 years into I guess my career, probably 10 years sort of more so kind of like full time, and so much of that early on as a performer, you just kind of like, you're establishing your skills, you're building your experience, you're really not making much money. Like, I think even just that moment which you hit as a performer when you're doing it kind of like sustainably, you're not necessarily putting any money kind of like in the bank or anything like that, but you're just actually able to do it viably. Like that in itself is a huge moment. And so, for me, I would say just more so just in these last couple of years, maybe since the industry in general, the performing industry and also the cruising industry has bounced back from COVID, to actually sort of like start being able to really put money away. Like the avenue that I'm putting it all is my home. I just have an apartment in Adelaide, which is one of the I guess cheaper sort of cities in Australia, but actually being in a position now where most of the just basic expenses of my day-to-day living are kind of covered, and I can like make real progress on that. Probably I would say probably 2.5 years. So where are we? Just into 2024. I think by the end of 2026, I can have that paid off, and just the fact that that's kind of like on the cards now is such a great feeling. And I think when something takes a while to sort of arrive, like it's not something you're given straight away, and then all of a sudden you start experiencing it. It's an amazing feeling. and I think
When you've
something that
gathered enough
you value.
momentum that everything you do starts to pay off so much more than you imagined, from the early days of possibly struggling to get by to now every gig
Yeah,
that you do and every time you perform, your value it's grown exponentially to a certain degree where now you can think, right, it's starting to pay off, and it snowballs even more from there.
yeah, it's wild, and yeah, that snowballing thing is a good way of putting it. Like in my experience, and I think probably for a lot of people, it's just not linear. Like it's nowhere near linear. Like I would say if you put it on a graph, the first 15 years was like a downward line, a financially downward line as you take all of that time to essentially kind of invest in yourself. And then I would say there was for me, it was a quick turning point, actually. Like that downward line kind of went up pretty quickly for, I would say, the next 5 years. But I literally mean just back to kind of like almost like a break even kind of level point, where 20 years in, you're like, okay, like the slate is sort of pretty clean,
Yeah.
and we now sort of have 20 years of skills and experience and contacts and everything, excuse me, and profile kind of built up. And then I would say it's wild how quickly, or suddenly, more so, certainly not quickly, like suddenly that's now like, oh wow, like it's kind of go time. And it's amazing how that kind of reframes your overall perspective on everything. Because when you're so many years down the track, and you're either sort of feeling like you're going backwards financially, or at best you're just kind of like stabilizing, you're kind of like, holy cow, like, am I doing this successfully, or is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or you're genuinely playing with kind of a phase of your life. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
decades.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
And
what it
it's like,
takes. It takes a lot longer than you'd imagine completely. So, can I just very quickly ask you to
yeah,
just keep your face a little bit more framed in the center, because it's kind of cutting down towards your nose and lower mouth on the camera.
is that a little better?
Yeah, perfect. Just so it's central, so we can see you when you're talking.
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I imagine. Well, I'm at the very beginning stages of what it is that I want to do and pursuing, and the only thing I can ever see, hear, read about from anyone example who's had any amount of success or made a career out of what they love doing is the main thing is it's going to take a lot longer than you first imagined, a lot longer.
Yeah,
But if you can stick to it and stick to it and stick to it throughout the tougher months, the dark days, the literal hunger, the panging hunger that you're going to get at some stages, that when it starts to come good, it's kind of like the best feeling in the world, that you've trusted your gut and it paid off.
yeah, yeah. That's so true. It's very true that I think for most people it takes longer. And like, man, I think we're in a really really interesting era. Social media, I think, is contributing to it. How visible everything is, and also how skewed things can be. Like you see someone on Instagram with a particular life or whatever, and it can very much make us want to kind of buy into this idea that everyone is ridiculously successful and it happens very very quickly. And I think genuinely for some people that is actually true, but I think it's a really really tiny percentage, and it can often be a real kind of alignment of factors, that make that person and their career, almost a little bit like a unicorn, like that
100%.
genuinely does exist.
Yeah, well, the way I tend to see it now, especially because I see the massive lens now, as you were saying, through social media, is that it seems as though everyone gets there really, really quickly, and it's just that easy. Because you only ever see the ones with the most views, because you only ever see the ones that are the best. That's the way the algorithms work. You're not going to see the hundreds of thousands, if not multiple millions of people who are just terrible. You're not going to see it. But for every overnight success, there is years and years of hard work. Yes, you get the unicorns and the people who stumble across the quickest way, or a little cheat code, or something that works for them, which people haven't realized beforehand, and for the most part, though, they don't know how they did it. They just kind of got lucky that they stumbled on that exact way of working it. Like you might think of a comedian, for example, who writes just a one-hit wonder joke, and that
Mm.
joke or that one set that they had, which for whatever they didn't know why it worked, they didn't know they couldn't analyze it and tell you exactly why it worked. It's just that they put it together and it worked. Almost
Mm.
like a one-hit wonder song, and that goes incredibly well. But you can really tell who the greats are and who the people who have worked the hardest and experienced and have that knowledge in their industry, in their area, when you see them just drop off in a couple of years' time.
Mm.
2 or 3, 4 years' time, they don't continue that same growth. The people who
Mm.
have that linear, or that exponential growth, which isn't linear, have that up and down, and then when they hit that turning point, it goes up and up and up and up and up and up. When you see
Mm.
those ones who just hit it from already here,
Mm.
and then they don't continue to go up, they just stay there and they plateau, because they didn't know, they got lucky, which is
Yeah.
great to see. But the way I'm forcing myself to see it in a way, because this is how I believe it would work, is that when you see these successes online, or the way that online helps to bring out successful people in their industry, is the fact that you can now look at things analytically, and you can now look at the data and see what works and what doesn't work. Whereas for
Mm.
yourself, 20 years ago, when you started doing comedy, you'd
Mm.
have to go into a room of people and stand up there and do it in
Mm.
front of all these people. They might
Mm.
laugh, they might not laugh, depending on who the audience is, and depending on where it is and how you feel and how you delivered it on the night.
Mm.
But you wouldn't get that data. You'd be so full of nerves and nervous energy and anxiety about the
Mm.
whole thing that it kind of just goes through as a blur. And then by the end of it, you're like, was it good? Was it not good? Hopefully you've got some good, honest, critical friends around you who can tell you if it's good or not.
Right.
But you can't see if it really was good or if you actually need to make a change or not. Whereas now you can see very quickly if what you're doing isn't working. And if it's
Yeah.
not working, you can make a change and you can see what works better than other things, looking at the so much different data that's there around you, and obviously the masses of people that are there doing very similar things to you, and you can learn
Mm.
off what they've done and what they haven't done,
Mm.
which a lot of people don't tend to look at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. Go for it.
no, I was just going to say that's the way I kind of see it now, as instead of seeing it as such a negative that it's a massive market and it's just if you chalk everything up to luck, you're not giving yourself enough credit if you ever do succeed.
Mm.
But you're also almost looking at things in such a way that you're kind of pissed off and jealous that somebody else has got very lucky and you believe it should be you. But if you can try and spin that and look at it as in, maybe I'm just not doing the right things, I'm going to use that as fuel to learn the right things to be successful in this, then you've got a chance. But if you just chalk it entirely up to, they got lucky, they just got picked out by TikTok or Instagram, then what are you going to do? You're just going to slowly get more demotivated until it doesn't work, until you quit. Or you're going to get back on your horse and try it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and that online stuff that you're talking about, that's very true. How now it can probably happen. Well, I'm sure it definitely can happen even quicker. Breaking through to a profile now, just based on that, you have a few clips that get 1 million views each or something, and all of a sudden, you've got this kind of following. So I can see that, yeah, absolutely, even more so now. Like when I was sort of, in the early stages of things, kind of 20 years ago, it might have been more so perhaps that like a big management agency or a TV network or an influential festival might have really sort of seen something in you, like your particular style or your identity or something about sort of, what it was that you represented. And that was probably more so the way in which you would really skyrocket very quickly in the industry. I think the online stuff probably was more like about kind of 10 years ago that you started to see, or maybe fractionally longer than that, but you started to sort of see people come along and be able to take that into their own hands and really create that regardless of what anybody else thought about them. So, whichever kind of way it is that it kind of happened or happened, I think the bigger lure of that to the broader industry or anyone else sort of outside of it is that happens for everyone, and that's the way that you kind of do it. And I think, as we were sort of saying, that's a way in which things unfold for a very, very small percentage of people, whether you're a personal trainer or a musician or an entrepreneur or a comedian or whatever you are, or I don't know, a golfer, anything. Yeah, and I think that can be a real kind of, I don't know, man. Everyone loves the unicorn. Everyone loves that story. Everyone worships it when they see it in someone else, and everyone wants to be it. And there's nothing wrong with like trying to do that, but I think for the vast majority of um, people who end up being able to do something successfully, I think a much better visual is like a wall where you're creating layers of bricks, and it's like, you know brick on brick on brick on brick, and then sometimes a storm comes along and knocks a couple of layers of bricks over, and then you put those bricks back and you go for more bricks. Um and it's something, as you said, it's something that develops over time. But if you've done that, if you've genuinely done due diligence to that process, I think just to sort of bring it back a little bit to where I'm at, and the moment that we were um, discussing, where things start to sort of happen, is you realize that there's a real stability in that. There's the time that it took, whilst it's kind of like frustrating at times, and it might bring up doubts and so forth, and it also takes a lot of work. By the time by the time things do start kind of happening, the stability of those foundations is something that I think you can't replace, and I think I have a real appreciation now for that.
Of course. I mean,
Um,
it's amor fati,
yeah,
which is basically to love the hand that you're dealt. You've the hand you're dealt. You've got to deal with it, and you've got to use it well. And if you look back, if you like yourself and like where you are or what you want to do, in order to appreciate that, you've got to look at everything that came your way previously, the good
mm,
things and the bad, the best of things that could have happened to you, and your worst mistakes. You learn from them in a way which puts you in a better position going forward, solidifies that foundation. I feel like the only real main factor which differs now with the way that social media works and social media content creators is the fact that, unfortunately, it's now a different skill set.
yeah,
Whereas being a comedian or a musician or a PT or whoever you might be, you could be the best musician in the world, or you could be the best comedian in the world. But if, in order to do well on social media and to share and to become bigger with the following online, isn't simply just a case of being really good at your one thing. You've also got to learn the new skill of
yeah,
virality and capturing attention and retaining attention in basically
yeah,
dependent on the format. We're now creating content for a format, whether it be a reel,
mm,
whether it be a reel, whether it be a YouTube video, whether it be a story, whether it be a post, whether it be an advert for TV. You have to learn to create for your medium
mm,
in order to be successful on
yeah,
that medium, or else it's just not going to get pushed well as much. And I say that's an unfortunate thing because it really does deteriorate from a lot of quality. And the most standalone experience of this, and the
mm,
perpetrators of this, would be musicians. There are God knows how many absolutely incredibly talented, young and old vocalists, singers, guitarists, pianists, any instrument under the sun. So talented, more talented than any of the real stars. But the stars are the ones who had their skill, developed their skill, and then also learned the game behind the scenes. They learned how to use what they
yes,
had, market it, develop it, produce it, and capture an audience which
mm,
stuck with them and helped them to propel what they had further. And it's taken a long
mm,
time. This is only one evolution of where we're at now. Where if you go back to even like the early days of YouTube being the first online video sharing platform, the things that went
mm-hmm,
viral and you had to do to be successful back then are vastly different to the things you have to do now. Where you could have had, and even before that, where
yeah,
people used to just share around DVDs of comedy sets and bootleg movies which weren't in the cinema. People share them around. That's a different form of virality. It's like, what do you need to be able to? Back then, it was a lot easier to just be very good at that one thing, and then if you were
yeah,
lucky enough, someone would share it. But now there's a whole different area of, right, if I share this content, what are people going to think of me? If I share this clip online of somebody else doing something,
Right.
are people going to, you're effectively signaling, what are people
Mm.
going to think of me because I shared this? Are they going to like me more or like me less? Does this put me across as an intelligent person? Does this make me seem arrogant or cocky? Does this make me seem popular? Because same as branding with clothes. If you see somebody wearing, when you were younger, you'd care a lot more about these things, and that's where it's at the moment. Where the way I see it, especially with comedians, you see so many different comedians now who kind of just go viral overnight. Like Theo Von, as an example, is just somebody who skyrocketed out of nowhere as a viral sensation, and absolutely fucking hilarious guy. He had to learn the medium and learn the discipline of what he was doing before he could get to where he is now.
Yeah. I actually met Theo and performed with him in 2015 in Los Angeles at this little club called the West Side Comedy Theatre. And he had just been given, I think, his first Netflix special by that stage. He was already like a very good comic. He'd obviously broken through. Like that's a huge deal. And from, I don't know exact figures, so I'm not giving anything away, but from recollection, it was something around about $300,000 that they were giving people sort of at that stage for a special. So
Australian
already
dollars,
by
US
that time,
dollars.
Can't remember. Maybe US might have been 500,000 Australian. And so he was already at that. He was sort of already at that stage, which is a huge point to be. If that's the biggest you ever get in your career, you've done amazingly well. For that as a one kind of as a one hit kind of figure to be given for your product, and then you obviously just tour off of the back of the profile that helps you kind of generate. Like, so he was kind of he was already there at that stage, and had done a lot of work, was very talented, was really cool as well, man. Like, totally humble, and I've seen him a few times since then, and just to kind of watch what's happened in the whatever that is, maybe about 8 years or so since then. Like, it's insane how big it is now. And I guess I just feel kind of lucky to have seen kind of like an intermediate stage of that that evolution for him, because as you sort of say, people could well look at him now and just be like, I don't know, it could all just kind of, it could just seem like that's how it's always been, you know what I mean? But it's like,
Yeah.
no, there's a lot of things that led to that.
Yeah, those small steps along the way, those small ebbs and flows, the lessons you learned, as you say, are invaluable. Where you summed it up perfectly now, whether the stage that you're at within your career, from where you started to where you are now, and where you're looking, the trajectory you're going on, the way you're looking to go. You summed it up perfectly in the sense that you've just got to be grateful for what came beforehand, to see the struggles as building that foundation, which you can build very firm structures on top of. Obviously, you always need the look. The look always has to be there. But once you've committed to yourself that you're in it completely, then the only way you can go is up until you quit.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have any interest in cricket, being
a little bit.
Is that something?
Yeah.
A little bit. A little bit. Yeah.
Obviously, an England supporter. Obviously.
Yeah, that doesn't work out too badly for you. You guys are pretty darn good. But
sometimes
the famous Australian Test cricket captain Steve Waugh, probably going back about 20, maybe even more than that, 25 years now, probably late 90s. He had this quote of luck equaling the combination of opportunity and preparation. So you talk about this idea of luck. It's like, luck is a real thing, and luck can definitely influence where you go and how things unfold, and maybe even sort of what degree of success you have. I would definitely agree with that. I think you'd have to be crazy to say that luck doesn't play a part. But the way that he broke it down was, it's like, it's the combination of that thing that happens in the moment, whatever it is, that person who sees you at the right time, or the the moment that you kind of really rise to a challenge unbelievably and produce an amazing result of some sort. So it's that opportunity, it's that meeting of the moment, but it's also it's the preparation. It's the preparation that you've done. You're not gonna see the result of that luck if that moment comes along, that ideal moment, and you haven't done the work.
Yeah, I compare it a lot to surfing. I don't know if you surf much or not.
I've had a couple of attempts, very bad.
So I put it a lot towards surfing and say it's very similar to surfing in the sense that it is very difficult. It's very difficult to do. It's not like skiing or skateboarding where you just keep going and trying again and again and again and again. You spend a lot of time, the majority of time, just in the water, floating around, waiting and waiting and waiting. You see an opportunity, a wave, you take it. What happens when you first start surfing? You don't catch it. It's shit. You're shit. You fall off. You just paddle back out, do the hard work, paddle back out again, wait and wait and wait for the next wave to come along, and then go. And then the longer you do it, the more you get better at spotting waves coming your way, at new opportunities coming your way, and whether they're going to be good ones, whether they're going to be shit ones. The better you get, the longer you can ride that wave for, and the more you can do on that wave, and the better you can do from that. But the point being is that no matter how good of a surfer you are, you're not going to post the best score unless you get the best wave. You get better at riding these waves the more you're out there. You don't just get better at it from watching waves come in from the shore. So you've got to be out there failing over and over and over again, catching these different opportunities and doing everything you can on each of these opportunities to incrementally get better at such a minute, minuscule rate that eventually you're very good and you can catch these big waves, post some incredible scores, and everyone looks at it thinking, oh my God, it's a God-given talent. It's like, no.
Yeah.
The God-given talent was the grit and determination to stay out there, getting slammed every single time, getting pitted, slammed against the floor, dragged under, almost drowning multiple times, I'm sure, to get to the stage where you are now good enough and you've earned the opportunities that come your way. That me or you could go out right now and go surf, and we could try and surf at a 10-foot wave. We're gonna get very hurt very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it could end up as a viral YouTube clip, but maybe just not one we're particularly proud of.
Yeah, it's exactly that, and that's the best analogy I can put towards it. But there's also the side of the luck which you don't see coming, like you were mentioning, the opportunity that you don't see. You don't know who's going to be in the audience. Like back in the day when it was who saw who and who knew who, and they thought, I like you, and they could have just been there by complete chance. And there's a great story which I remember, and it's in a book. It's in loads of books, I'm sure. But one I heard it in was called The Psychology of Money. And it was talking about the idea of luck when it comes to wealth creation. And the example that they used was of Bill Gates, obviously being one of the richest people ever to have lived. And so the luck that Bill Gates had was that his teacher used to work for NASA or something like that, or I can't remember the exact details. But right back at the beginning of his school career at high school, his teacher had brought a computer, and he got really interested and invested into computing. And I can't remember the exact numbers particularly, but the working at Bill Gates going to a school which had a computer were 1 in a million.
Yeah,
because it was the only school, or there's only so many schools in the whole of the world, in the USA in particular, that had computers. And he was 1 in a million that went to that school which had a computer.
That's
and
nuts.
Then, out of all the kids that were in that area, in the catchment area for that school, he was a 1 in a million kid who went on the computer and built, started to code and learn how to code to become where he was.
Yeah.
The story doesn't end there, though, because Bill Gates obviously made multiple billions from there, but he also had a business partner. his best friend back, I can't remember his name now, but his best friend back at high school, who was working on building code with at the time, he was, by all rights, just as brilliant and incredible as Bill Gates was, and was in that same position as he was, where coming together, if things would have went differently, they would have both been the names on the edge of your lips when you think about computing and multi-billionaires and blah, 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 blah. However, with this person, he got hit by a train whilst biking home.
Wow.
And out of all the kids that year who got hit by trains and were killed, the odds were also 1 in a million.
Yeah.
So from the two complete opposite ends of the spectrum being 1 in a million chance that you were in this exact position where you were to take off and be one of the most financially successful people ever to have lived, and 1 in a million to be one of the most unlucky people in the world in the exact same position, practically inseparable as best friends, to be hit by a train and killed before he was 18.
Yeah, it's wild. It
puts things into massive perspective, where when you doing your own thing and where you are, the more you think about the odds that you weren't born into extreme poverty or with illness or in an area with no opportunities whatsoever or abusive parents or whatever might have been the case, you would not be where you are now without maybe even just that one thing that happened to you. You may have just gone to a comedy show or watched comedy on TV once and it sparked something in you to take you to where you are now.
Yeah. That's that stuff's so interesting. It's fascinating, and totally. I get the randomness of it and how significant the randomness can end up being. And I think end of the day, pray to whoever you pray to that that stuff comes along, because as you sort of saying, that's the lightning in a bottle kind of stuff. We can't control that. I think just kind of reflecting on my own journey, it's like there's no doubt been key moments or significant moments where things like that have happened in some way, and I think.
Do any come to mind?
Oh man, if I really reflected, I'm sure it's been a huge thing of just choose your own adventure and things. I'll tell you one recently. About a year ago, I was in Sydney, and I normally, when I'm at the Comedy Store, I'll normally host the shows or I'll normally headline. And I just got offered an extra little week because I just had another week in Sydney tacked on, and they said you can just do some literally like 5-minute spots, which pay very little, but you're on stage for 5 minutes a night. They said if you want those as well, and I was like, yeah, why not? Let's do that. And then it turned out that the headliner that week was a lady who's a well-established comic in the US. She's had a couple of Netflix specials already. Her name is April Macy. Very funny, and we got along great. And just because I was kind of there that week performing alongside her, we got the opportunity to cross paths, which we wouldn't have otherwise if I said I'm only going to be there, if you're headlining me. And she asked me to come and open for her in America. So in August and September, I'm going over and doing, like a month of breaking into that market, under the umbrella. That would be one example of that.
Is that August, September coming up?
Yeah.
See, those opportunities in particular, like I'm a massive fanciful. I got this word wrong in the last podcast as well. I fantasize a lot. Fanciful, like thinker in terms of wow, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, and that gives me excitement throughout my days to think where that could lead to and where that could lead to, and those little carrots which keep dangling in front of you to think this could happen, then this could happen. That's what keeps you going and keeps you going. Without just by complete chance, you could have said no, and somebody else, without him cancelling and backing out, you wouldn't be where you might be in 10, 15, 20 years. The biggest example for me that stands out massively was with my girlfriend Katie. You met Katie, obviously. Love her to pieces. We've going all around the world together and doing whatever we can together. I mentioned we both did the season in Greece, but so we didn't know each other before Greece. We met in Greece. But the way that we met in Greece was that originally Katie was supposed to be going to a different location in Greece.
Yeah.
And she was all planned on all through the company before I knew her to go to a different hotel from this chain. And just when she went to go and send over her passport details so they can book her flights to go, turns out that her passport had expired and she had no idea that the passport was expired. So she had to wait weeks and weeks on end for the passport to get renewed and come back, so they could finally send her out to the location she needs to be at. And obviously the location had changed because of different demands. Lo and behold, she ends up coming to the one that I'm at. If that never happened, who the fuck knows where I'd be right now? Who I'd be speaking to or what I'd be doing. And so I'm lucky that she's so forgetful, I'd say. So lucky that she's very forgetful.
Just a little admin anomaly, and it has altered the course of both of your lives.
And everyone else's. And everyone else that we speak to. I mean, as a personal trainer, the one thing I love about my job is the fact that the things that I do, I don't just affect them, I affect their entire lives and their output towards everyone else.
Yeah.
If I can help them to be healthier and fitter and stronger and feel better about themselves, they're going to be more positive a lot of the time, and then they're going to go out and spread that positivity elsewhere. And I have no doubt, I have no doubt, for yourself in comedy is the joy that you spread throughout entire communities of people and families is priceless.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's like, it's not just the direct thing that you're doing with, either your client or my audience or whatever, but it's that referred effect. That's what you're talking about, and how massive that can be.
Yeah, definitely. It butterflies way further than you could imagine, which it's just it blows my mind massively, and it just just going into a daze thinking about it now. But anyway, enough taken slightly away from all that. So you got the opportunities coming up in August and September to go perform in America. Where in America are you performing?
So I will be teaming up with April in St. Louis, Tampa, and Chicago. That's for starters. And then I've already been over there 2 or 3 times myself, and so I have some people in New York and LA, and then also just north of the border on the West Coast in Vancouver, where I can do some productive stuff. So yeah, I would say it'll go close to being 2 months away over there, and I think just with the balance at the moment, the ships by and large being the kind of backbone of my schedule in Australia, I think that's fantastic from the perspective of really consolidating things financially and getting a lot of stage time, working on my craft, even though it's kind of under the radar outside of the bubble that you're on while you're out there on the ocean. But then to have these couple of months where it's like a real injection of a fresh energy. It's a bigger pond. It'll definitely put me out of my comfort zone a bunch, and I'll have to find a way to deal with that. Just really quickly, actually, even this last ship, just doing the transit from Brisbane to Seattle, every audience was 2/3 American, and changing.
Gives you a great little training spot.
Oh man, unbelievable! And it's just crazy how much it just sparks your brain to have to think in a different way, or adapt, or make something palatable, to a different audience, and how positive that is to be sort of shaken up like that. So I think no question that's going to happen over there in the States, and then there's actually the whole other side of things, which is you're putting yourself in a market where we're talking about things happening, luck happening, or opportunity maybe. You're putting yourself out there for that, like an entirely different market to perhaps see value in what you do that would never have any exposure to you or interest in you if you just stayed in your own little pond, so to speak.
Yeah, putting yourself into that sort of danger zone, that anxious space where you don't really know what's going to happen. and seeing very clearly whether you sink or you swim, and you kind of just you're forced to make do within that. So how does, obviously with traveling a lot through the cruise all the cruise work and the tours you do in Australia as well, how does that affect a comedian's writing process? Because I get the impression that with any kind of creative flow and creative writing or creative production, you need to be in a certain kind of mental space, which isn't necessarily the critical analyzing space and the performance space of when you're performing too much. So how do you strike that balance between performance and creativity?
Yeah, that's a good. I'm looking a lot at that at the moment. I think I've had a very non-creative, probably 2 or 3 years in the sense of written creativity.
We can blur that out if you want.
What's that? Sorry.
We can bleep that out if you want.
No, not at all. No. It's a really valid question. I've been thinking a lot about it over the last kind of few weeks, and I think the conclusion I've come to with that is that there are a lot of aspects of what I'm doing, that over time you need to pay attention to. We've been talking about the financial side of things. That's a very real thing. I'm 42 years of age. I don't want to be broke. I want to have financial foundation. So the fact that I've sort of really started to take a good kind of handle on that's terrific. Physically, I've had like a couple of injuries. I've had Achilles. I mentioned to you just off air that I had an Achilles issue for a couple of years, and that's been very difficult. Kind of being full time on the road, with a day to day kind of constraint there, and I'm just sort of starting to get on top of that. And so my point is, there's a lot of different. There's a lot of different aspects that I think you need to have a kind of a handle on if you're going to really move the overall level of your life and your career forward. And so I sort of see this creative thing now as something that I can really refocus my attention on, given that I've got a bunch of these other things a lot more under control than I have in the past. So it's a funny little position to be in, where I'm aware that I haven't created a lot of new stuff, but I also am not freaked out by that. I just see it as another variable. And for me, yeah, for sure. And you're gonna naturally, life is it's a very dynamic, real thing, and you're gonna have patches where your focus is in one area for a while. Something really big comes up that you need to kind of pay attention to, and other areas are going to kind of drift off a little bit. You know what I mean? And just be a little bit more kind of status quo. And I think an ability to reflect on that is a really, really important thing. And at the very least, just be aware that, like, in maybe 2 or 3 areas of your life, you can see yourself making massive moves forward, and in other areas, things feel like they're a little bit.
As well. Like you're saying, for example, not worried. You're not worried that you're not writing at the moment, and that's, for me at my stage in particular, obviously doing the whole van life, is like, what's at the beginning of this, it was a case of, right, what's going to fall by the wayside if I'm working on certain things. And I heard an amazing quote which went along the lines of, if you want to be successful in anything, you've also got to decide what it is that you're okay with being shit at.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of really decide what it is where you want to focus your energy at what periods, in order to kind of balance it out by the end. But you're going to have to put a lot of energy into one area, whether that be your creative writing. For yourself, this is your creative writing, your performances, your financials, your backbone, family potentially as well, and injuries, and diverting your energy into the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that's so true. There's so much wisdom to that. Everything's a trade-off, and we're entities with finite energy and resources and time and everything. And it's funny. I mean, I as sort of like a dude in his very early 40s. My mates, all my friends, who I feel like I have pretty shared values with, they're all on their second and third child now. And I'm living out of a suitcase, with my career having been, without question, the main focus of my adult life. And so, you could potentially look at that and go, man, like, what's kind of happened there. But I think with a bunch of these other things so much more under control now, like a solid kind of financial platform, and the fact that the schedule's booked up, 12 months in advance, whereas like any performer or most performers will tell you early on, man, like you are literally like week to week, or if you know what you're doing in 4 weeks time, you know what I mean? Like you're doing really, really well, and the energy that kind of takes away from, other areas of your life is just immense. And so, with some of those things kind of more under control now, things like having more of a daily focus on my creativity, or being open to, meeting someone and actually teaming up and feeling like I've got something, of real kind of stability to kind of offer now, like that kind of springs up. And
Yeah, to see all these little wins over
that's something I've
time.
been very
To see all these little wins over time
for
compound
sure.
to it. That foundation you were talking about.
No question. And sorry, as soon as you just sort of said that, little wins, man, like that one, it's so true. And I think a big part of that as well is so often they're not visible to the outside. Like you kind of, it's so valuable to be keeping track of of the little wins, because they're your markers of the ways in which you're making progress. Everyone wants the big win. Everyone wants the big story, the big Facebook update where you get 500 likes. Do you know what I mean? But that stuff happens once every few years, and it can be very, very easy. Or A, for other people not to see the progress you're making, but B, for you to kind of buy into the fact that there's no big reaction to what you're doing at a particular moment. And if you can stay locked in on those little wins, it's such a great way to stay trusting in what you're doing. And I think that's the stuff over time that leads to the big wins.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Having that mentality, well, you wouldn't be so far into a successful career where you are now, without having that in the beginning. And everyone at their different stages has that. And as you say, like the fortune favors the committed, fortune favors the. Everyone always says fortune favors the bold, but in terms of it's just sticking at it, just being there, sticking at it. If you can find any little cheat code or hack which is going to keep you on that path of what you're doing at the moment, it's always going to be helpful. And those little wins, step by step by step. The fact that you may have, to some people, that's just waking up before 12 p.m. in the afternoon, and that's a win for them because they've added. But then think how that snowballs, though. To think that that's an extra, potentially an extra 4 hours of your day, which can be spent reading, writing, studying, whatever that might be. But if you were able to do that and change that for an entire month, let's say you were bedridden for an entire month, depressed, feeling down, out of sorts, unmotivated entirely, and you just spend most of your time in bed watching Netflix or whatever it is that you might be doing as your kind of own recovery process, the littlest of win, which to anybody else is like just a given, is what allows that snowballing effect to occur year on year on year on year on year. And you build those into your habit, and you build that mentality, which I can see you definitely have, which the majority of people in my experience who don't have those kind of aspirational goals, they'll have their own goals for their own reasons, which is great. And that's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But for the people who say they want to achieve certain things, which others don't, if you don't have that quality of A, naivety to an extent, and B, I'd like to call it tactical delusion. It's tactical delusion because if you didn't have that delusion, you'd never make it in the first place. You'd never step out the door.
Yeah.
You'd never even set the alarm to get up at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And to see it, I mean, on that path that everyone goes on, it's crucial. So just bringing that back a little bit to say the writing. So obviously, when you perform, it's a very polished. From what I've seen, it's a very polished routine, and the stuff that you do and the stuff that you say, it's you've ironed the crease. You've ironed the fuck out of that t-shirt. There's no creases at all. It's perfectly laid up. It's on a frame on the wall. The way you deliver what you've done so far, that you've spent that time perfecting a routine or multiple routines and your delivery within those routines, and then working with an audience as well. One thing I've always been curious about, especially with comedy, I ask musicians this all the time, is about people's own creative process. One with music, it seems very different, but with comedy, is there is there certain points that you need to hit? Is there certain things that make something funny? Or is it very often just a case of it comes to you, you write it down, you experiment a little bit? Or are there kind of these anchors which you put in place, which you can use strategically to make something funny?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know what? I think if most comics are honest, I think they, at most, you get a sense that something might be funny, but you really don't know until an audience either validates it or kind of, rejects it. And so it's just kind of what my creative processes would be. I just journal every day, so like I'm constantly writing. I don't know if I'm sure everyone's familiar with that sort of that term writer's block. I mean, that generally refers to someone who wants to create something and then sort of sees the blank page and then is kind of frozen and can't do anything about it. So I just write every day for a couple of hours when I'm at a cafe. I've got a coffee, a bit of caffeine's firing around, just so that muscle of being able to articulate myself and possibly think a little bit creatively is kind of being activated every day.
Tickled.
And then yeah, being tickled, exactly. And I think actually it's funny because even when I'm not particularly focusing on my creativity, I think that's something that helps me with the improvisational side of what I do on stage, with that regular sort of practice of articulating myself on page. And then when I'm on stage, the only thing that's different is I'm not writing it down, I'm just verbalizing it. So that's sort of something I've really only sort of thought about recently, because I sometimes beat up on myself a little bit about not spending perhaps enough time specifically creatively writing to build new content. But I do think that a lot of the improvised content comes out because of the amount of writing I do, where I'm just simply articulating my thoughts on paper. So I think I've got to give myself a little bit more credit than I have for that. But in terms of perhaps generating more actual kind of like what you might call like scripted content, like your go-to kind of material that you build over time, that for me is just a shift. And I think it's a shift I'm probably getting ready to make again, where maybe for the next, I don't know, 6 months, I will really push myself to write down every kind of thought that I think has some kind of comedic merit to it, and then really actively play with that kind of the laboratory, the alchemic kind of process of like how do we craft something out here, and then pushing yourself to take that thought to stage, even if it maybe only feels kind of half done, and just challenging yourself to potentially say something to an audience that isn't possibly funny, or you don't really quite know how it's going to go or what its rhythm is, and then entering into that creative process of listening to how they respond and then tweaking it from there, and perhaps going back to the drawing board, getting it back on stage again. And I think for most comics, that's probably the only way that you build something over time. It's everyone wants the little tip of the iceberg that's visible, i.e. the new joke that's great, but it's the iceberg under the surface of writing, testing, back to the drawing board, retesting, etc. That produces that lovely visible iceberg. So I think once again it's a process, and there's no quick fix to it. It's something you've got to kind of adjust your mentality and give it a bit of time, I think, as well.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. I feel like for myself, one thing that's helped me massively with the podcast and in general conversation with other people, which I really wasn't expecting to be the case, which was I heard along the way that writing is a form of thinking, and that by writing out your thoughts, it helps you to structure them in a way which you would not have been able to previously. But when we think and we speak, we often don't think about what we say. It just kind of flows out of us in a particular way. But when we practice slowing things down and writing things and then reading over what we've actually written, we can see that, hang on, that doesn't grammatically make sense, or it doesn't quite fit. And you get that very visceral feeling of this sounds right, or this sounds a little bit off. But then the way that translates back into your speech, in your performances on stage, or the way I speak to other people on podcasts or in person, or even my own clients and bosses, I'm able to deliver what I actually intend in a much more eloquent way first time, without bumbling around and making a mess of what it is that I'm actually trying to say.
Yeah, and that's so powerful, as you say. Whatever platform that's on, whether you're dealing with your personal training clients or your listeners and viewers with your podcast, or just in general day-to-day chat, it's so powerful to be able to articulate yourself well without a whole lot of fluff, isn't it? I think so. One quick thing. I think people often think that, like, great speakers or whatever, they're like, great orators, and like some people, they are just terrific to listen to. They've got a really commanding presence or something like that. But I reckon the best speakers and the best communicators are the ones who can just tell you what they're thinking or what you need to know really quickly, and then shut the fuck up.
Yeah, shut the fuck up needs to be used a lot more by a lot more people, and not taken so painfully. There was I can't remember who it was. I think I'm getting this wrong, but I can't remember who it was who said. But they'd written an entire long letter out to somebody. This is a centuries-old tale from one sort of world leader at a time, and he'd written this massive letter out, explaining what to do and how he felt about a certain situation. And at the bottom, he wrote, "P.S. I'm sorry this letter was so long. I didn't have the time to make it shorter."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Which sums that up absolutely perfectly, that it takes time and it takes thought, revision after revision, and thought after thought to concise what it is that you mean into a package which is not only makes sense and not only helps get your point across, but is also palatable by the other person. A big part of what you do and what I do, we can have a thought in our head which is absolutely fucking hilarious, and you just start chuckling to yourself before you can even get it out. But if you can't get it out properly in a way which lands with your audience, depending on who that audience is as well, then it's just as useless as mumbling.
Yeah, that's very true. So definitely that ability to kind of communicate and articulate whatever it is that you're thinking to someone else, or it's very important. But it can be helped by that process of, like, regularly writing. I would also say one more thing in terms of, if anyone is just open to maybe like a little tiny life hack or a little suggestion, but the writing is also unbelievable on a sort of a by and large day-to-day basis, as much as you can kind of incorporate it into maybe 20 minutes over your morning coffee or something like that. It's unbelievable for actually getting in touch with what you think within your own life, like that process of, like, visually putting it down on paper. There's so much stuff buzzing around our heads sometimes, and sometimes we're conscious of things and sometimes we're not, but there's an unbelievable impact, I think, to actually physically putting something on the paper. And by the time that you realize you've written the same thing for 7 days straight about something that's bothering you, you're like, oh, maybe I should look at that thing. And I think the help that can be within your own life is just massive.
100%. I love that same process. I'm a big perpetrator of things that you do affecting other areas of your life without even knowing so. As, again, coming back to me being a PT, that one of our main things is how we feel and how we think and how we perceive things is all connected in a way that we cannot separate whatsoever. If you are healthier within your body, within your routines, within your sleep, within your diet, your mental health is going to be a lot more positive because of that. Your physical health is going to benefit because of that. Your relationships are going to be better because of that. Your career is going to be better because of that. Everything and every detail, when you look at improving and look at the positives and improving one area in whatever means that might be, that's going to help somewhere else. The big thing for me is picking those things which are beneficial to me in a way that compounds even more. So writing in particular is a perfect example for yourself. Creative writing, journaling, it does way more than just getting down your thoughts onto a piece of paper. The outreach from that is a lot further. For me, writing down ideas and then using those ideas as assets for different articles or different posts or different questions to ask to different people. Using those things and using everything that I create and that I do as an asset, which benefits me and hopefully can benefit a lot of other people at that same time. So to do that, I feel like I've had people. Well, one thing I've always tried to hold true, which I was told from a young age, is that you should always have a creative outlet. And for a while, I didn't even believe in it. I just thought, why? Creativity, for the most part, when I was younger, was a waste of time. I loved sport. I did enjoy studying, and I enjoyed trying to think of how I can get ahead and what I can do. But I thought of creativity as kind of a waste of time, and it's just like you're away with the fairies, and it's like, yeah, you're not going to get anywhere by doing that. But then only more so now, seeing that those creative endeavors that we choose to go on have such a lasting, meaningful, and arguably the most important thing that we can do for all aspects of our life. And whether it be comedy, music, podcasting, dancing, arts and crafts, whatever that might be, it's having that one thing which can rein it all back in.
Yeah, that's so true. And I apologize that I have to head off shortly to this physio appointment.
Of course, yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up about the referral to the other areas of your life. Like when you're being creative, or you're sort of actively just engaged in a creative activity or outlet, like the insights and the energy that it kind of unlocks is huge. And there's a book as well, if any of the folks listening to this are interested. It's very much like a creativity Bible. It's called The Artist's Way, and that talks a lot about the journaling. But just with what you just mentioned there, summarizing everything up here about your areas of your life being interlinked, it talks massively about that. It's like you become healthier, you become better in your work, you become better in your work, you become happier in your relationships, you become happier in your relationships, you make more money. You just the massive referred effect of work on any area of your life is so huge, and it's like all of them have the combined effect of raising the overall water level. You literally become better at something way over there by addressing this thing over here, and so forth. That's always really, really stuck with me, that you don't necessarily, if there's something you're really passionate about, you don't necessarily have to be focused on that 100% of the time. It's like if you go off and just become better or try something else in another completely different area, it will have a referred positive effect.
100%. And that's one thing I try to instill in all of my clients with regards to having your cornerstone habits. Cornerstone, like the gym, going to the gym, having a personal trainer, working out every morning or every other day, or going to a certain class. Having that cornerstone habit that you do no matter what holds so many different things together which you weren't aware of. Talking about discipline, talking about pushing yourself, talking about consistency, talking about enjoying yourself, and it's all those things kind of rein in. So I am very mindful about your time, because you've got to go very shortly, if not now. And it's a shame because we've just got into the good bits, the juicy bits, and which I love to talk about so much. What was that book called again?
Yeah, it's called The Artist's Way by a lady named Julia Cameron. Yeah, highly recommend.
The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I'll give that a read 100%, because that sounds right up my alley. But yes, I'd love to do it again sometime, Ben, and speak to you again. Whether you believe it or not, you're a very insightful guy, and you've got a lot of experience, and you can back it up as well. You back it up as well with what you do and everything else that you say. It comes from a place of experience. It's not just something you found online, or you're just touting because you've heard it somewhere else. It's something you thoroughly believe in, and to share that with me, it helps me out massively, and to anybody else as well. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, that's really kind, and that was awesome. That was awesome fun, and happy to do it again at any stage. And man, yeah, I hope there was a little bit of something in there for your listeners. Thanks to anyone who gave us their ear.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you so much.